Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
The last 10 minutes of the drive felt like I was swallowing gravel. Every streetlight, every familiar crack in the sidewalk, all of it felt more like a goodbye than a return. The kind of goodbye you say when you know damn well no one's gonna say it back. I hadn't been to my father's house since Christmas 2 years ago, when Leslie gave me a scented candle labeled "Calm the Hell Down" and told me it was a joke. That was the same night Dad forgot to put my name on the family photo ornament. Just left a blank tag swinging from the tree like it was waiting for someone more convenient to show up. I wasn't supposed to be at this party. That part is important. I didn't get an invitation, a call, or even one of those passive-aggressive family Facebook group messages. You know, the kind where they pretend it's public, so it's not technically personal. Not a word. Just a slip-up from my cousin Jess, who accidentally texted me instead of Jessica from tennis. She sent a picture of the centerpieces, golf-themed, of course, because my dad never shut up about his 9 handicap, and said, "Leslie went all out. I can't believe he's finally retiring." That was the moment it clicked. I wasn't invited. Not because of an oversight, not because someone forgot. I wasn't invited because he didn't want me there. My own father. The same man I loaned money to when he couldn't afford his back surgery. The same man who cried on my voicemail when Leslie's mom died, and he didn't want to look weak in front of her. The same man who told me, when I was 17, that I had her fire but not her softness, like being like my mother was both a compliment and a diagnosis. I pulled into the country club parking lot around 6:45. Late, technically, but early enough to still be noticed. I sat in the car for a few minutes, gripping the envelope like it might catch fire. It was just a plain white letter-sized envelope. No decoration, no calligraphy, no drama. That would come later. Inside was a check and a letter. Both of them were the last gifts I ever planned on giving him. The check was symbolic. The letter was surgical. Walking in was like walking into someone else's dream. There were balloons the color of whiskey and gold watches. Big block letters said, "Cheers to you, Hank," and people I barely recognized were sipping Chardonnay like they'd known him their whole lives. Some of them had. Some of them hadn't. I scanned the tables, looking for my name, even though I already knew it wouldn't be there. It was a stupid impulse. Like checking your phone for a call you know won't come. But I checked anyway. My cousin Steven made eye contact with me and froze like he'd seen a ghost with lipstick. His wife elbowed him, whispered something, and then she smiled like she was auditioning for a toothpaste ad. "Megan. Wow, look at you." Like I was an old high school friend they ran into at Target, not the daughter of the man they were clinking glasses for. I nodded politely. Didn't hug anyone. Didn't explain myself. I wasn't there to mingle or sip Merlot while someone's toddler knocked over the gift table. I was there to finish something that had been festering for years. And nothing festers quite like being erased in slow motion. I spotted Leslie first. She was wearing this shiny teal thing that looked expensive and exhausting. Her heels probably cost more than my last rent check. She saw me, blinked, and immediately her lips flattened into that face women make when they smell something sour and personal. She didn't say a word. Just leaned into Dad, whispered something, and then turned back to her wine like it might protect her. Then I saw him. My father. Hank. Everyone else called him that. Hank the golfer. Hank the legend. Hank the retired goddamn hero of the water department. He was shaking hands, doing the whole "oh stop it" laugh that made people believe he was humble. But I saw it, the tightening in his jaw when he saw me. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He looked like someone just told him a storm was about to roll in and wreck his perfect little outdoor wedding. There was no chair for me. Not even a folding one in the corner next to the speaker setup. Nothing. Every table had place cards with names written in gold cursive. Leslie's kids had 2 tables of their own. My name wasn't anywhere. Not on the seating chart, not on the guest book, not even scribbled on the back of a napkin. One aunt muttered under her breath, "I thought she wasn't coming." I turned my head slightly, made eye contact. She looked away, cheeks flushed. Good. I took a breath, felt the letter burning a hole in my palm. Then I walked right up to him. I didn't say hi or surprise or even his name. I just stepped in close enough that the music didn't matter and handed him the envelope like I was delivering a subpoena. He looked down at it, confused, and asked, voice calm but brittle, "What's this?" I smiled. A real smile. Not the polite kind. Not the kind you fake for family photos. I smiled like someone who'd been practicing for years. "The last check you'll ever get from me," I said. His mouth opened. No words came out. Leslie turned fully now, her wine glass dangling in the air like it was suspended by tension alone. I didn't wait for his reaction. I just turned around and walked back through the crowd that still hadn't figured out whether to pretend I was a waitress or a memory. But I wasn't done. Not even close. 6 months before the night of the party, back when the idea of not being invited still felt too ridiculous to even worry about, I was sitting at my kitchen table staring down at my checkbook like it was some kind of cursed artifact. I'd just finished my 3rd round of interviews that week, and the rejection emails were rolling in with the kind of speed usually reserved for bad news from doctors or IRS letters. I was 53 days into being unemployed, and I'd already sold the old piano, canceled my gym membership, and started watching YouTube tutorials on how to cut your own damn hair without ending up looking like a horror story. And yet, there I was, pen in hand, about to send another $1,200 check to my father. That month it was for Leslie's dental implants, because apparently her mouth was more important than my mortgage. The email she sent with the bill didn't even include a please. Just a PDF, an amount, and the phrase, "Appreciate the quick turnaround." That was Leslie's way of saying don't make this a thing. And because I had spent the better part of 2 decades making sure my father didn't have to worry about anything besides which pair of khakis matched his mood, I was about to make it not a thing once again. I started helping him in 2003, so yeah, that's a solid 24 years now. Not continuously, of course. There were gaps, brief ones, when I told myself he'd finally figured it out and didn't need my help anymore. But the calls always came back. Car repairs. The roof leaking. Leslie's youngest getting arrested for a DUI. It was always something, and it always came with that voice calm, paternal, just disappointed enough to make me feel like if I didn't help, I was letting someone down. For years, I was the only one still helping. My brother disappeared to Arizona after the second wife moved in, and my sister just stopped picking up calls altogether. She said she was preserving her peace, like this was a spiritual decision, and not just her way of saying, he's not my problem anymore. But I couldn't do that. Not then. Not after Mom died and I saw how lost he looked. Not after the day he sat me down in that awful brown recliner and said, "You're the only one with a good head on your shoulders, Megan." That line stuck to me like gum on a church pew. Every time I thought about cutting him off, I heard it echoing in my brain. But last year, when I called him and explained that I'd lost my job and needed to take a break from sending money for a little while, maybe just 2 or 3 months until I got back on my feet, he said something that finally burned that line to the ground. He said, "Well, you'll have to figure it out like adults do." Just like that. No pause. No offer to help, no understanding in his tone. Just a cold, clean dismissal like he was a judge and I'd brought a bad case into his courtroom. That moment, sitting alone on my front porch with the phone still hot in my hand, was when the foundation shifted. Not suddenly, not like an explosion, but like a slow sinkhole opening under your house. You don't notice it until your coffee table disappears into the ground. I realized then that I had never really been helping him out of love or obligation. I had been paying for his approval, his attention, his goddamn scraps of affection. And I'd been overpaying. It wasn't long after that phone call that I pulled every bank statement for the past 10 years. Every check, every wire, every Venmo to Leslie's oldest. The numbers were enough to make a financial advisor cry. Tens of thousands. I had bought them a vacation once, Yes, an actual vacation, because Leslie said they hadn't had a real honeymoon and everyone deserves one eventually. I found the email she sent thanking me for the resort gift card, and it was signed, "Warmly, Leslie." No love. Not even a sincerely. Just warmly, like we were exchanging casserole recipes instead of rewriting family history. So I went to a lawyer. A woman named Danielle, who had eyes like granite and the patience of a bomb technician. She helped me draw up documents to separate every financial tie, close every joint liability, remove my name from anything connected to his or hers. I even had her help me calculate a final payment based on the average of what I'd given over the past 5 years. That was the check I put in the envelope. $12,846. Final tally. No more. No less. Just enough to make sure he could never say I owed him anything. Back at the party, his hands trembled as he opened the envelope. I saw the moment he read the letter, the part where I told him I forgave him but would never trust him again. His mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. He looked like someone had swapped his cocktail for battery acid. And then Leslie reached over, snatched the paper from his hands like it was a winning lottery ticket she'd just realized had someone else's name on it. She skimmed it. Her perfectly plucked eyebrows lifted. "You can't do this," she said, like the envelope had personally insulted her wardrobe. I just smiled. I already did, and I swear, the silence that followed was louder than any scream I've ever heard. There was something deeply satisfying about watching my father hold that envelope like it was made of radioactive waste, arms stiff, fingers twitching, like the paper might crawl up his sleeve and lay eggs under his skin. He didn't look at me when he opened it, not directly. He stared at the edge of the paper like he was hoping it might disappear if he blinked long enough. But that's the thing about real consequences. They don't vanish when you close your eyes. They just wait patiently in the dark. Inside the envelope was a check written for $12,846, and taped to it a note. A short one, no more than 10 words, each one deliberate, each one as sharp as the years I'd wasted. Final payment. Don't contact me again. This is closure. I had printed it in black ink on white paper, no flourishes, no guilt-laced apologies, just the clean, cold honesty of a woman finally done being used. Now I know how that sounds. Some people would say I should have been more forgiving. That "he's still your father" crap that gets tossed around like it's a spell to ward off accountability. But the truth is, the day I stopped being his daughter in any meaningful sense was the day he looked me in the eyes and said my stepbrother was the future of the family business. Let's rewind a bit. After my mother passed, I was 29 years old, and suddenly the co-owner of a tiny hardware store that barely had enough customers to keep the lights on. My father didn't want to run it anymore. He said it reminded him too much of her, which I respected at the time. So I took it on. I learned how to deal with suppliers, handled payroll, built a website, even brought in local contractors for referral partnerships. I kept it alive through recessions and floods, and that one winter the pipes burst and took out the entire back office. For 14 years, I ran that place like it was my firstborn, and every Christmas I handed my father a cut of the profits. Every single year. Then came the day he showed up with Leslie's son, Brad, and said, "I think it's time he starts learning the ropes. This place should stay in the family." Like I was just the placeholder, the babysitter who kept the ship floating until the golden child arrived to take the wheel. Brad had never worked a day in retail, couldn't tell a socket wrench from a soup spoon, and the first thing he did was suggest we move everything online because physical stores are dead anyway. My father backed him. Smiled like Brad had just invented fire. The worst part? He told the Chamber of Commerce at their annual awards luncheon that Brad had revived the shop and that this boy's got the business sense I never had. They gave Brad a plaque with his name on it. I was sitting 3 rows back, clapping like a damn fool, pretending it didn't feel like watching someone else live inside my skin. I swallowed all that bitterness for months, until the checkbook and the bank statements made it impossible to keep pretending this was about loyalty or love. It was about patterns, who gets used, who gets praised, who gets fed lies until they believe silence is a virtue. I didn't want to be quiet anymore. When I met with Danielle, my lawyer, we didn't just talk about the check. We dug into every corner of my financial life that still had my father's fingerprints on it. Turns out, I was still listed as an emergency contact on 3 of his accounts, still co-signed on a loan I didn't remember agreeing to, and still paying annual fees on a shared mailbox in a building I hadn't stepped foot in since Obama's first term. We spent 4 weeks tearing through paperwork, closing accounts, notarizing letters, and sending certified mail that would land in his hands like tiny grenades. When I dropped that final check into the envelope, it was more than just money. It was the physical manifestation of a boundary, a line in the sand he could no longer step across without consequences. That envelope said, "You don't own any more pieces of me." And it felt goddamn glorious. Back at the party, Leslie finally yanked the letter from his hand and read the note aloud, like she thought saying it out loud would make it less real. "Final payment? Don't contact me again? Who do you think you are?" Her voice was sharp, brittle, the kind of brittle that cracks if you breathe on it too hard. Her face twisted, not just in confusion, but in offense, like I'd ruined her surprise party by showing up in a wedding dress. "You can't do this," she hissed, stepping toward me like I might still be intimidated by her expensive perfume and her surgically frozen forehead. I looked her square in the eyes and said, calmly, clearly, and without a single ounce of apology, "I already did." And for one perfect second, she didn't say a thing. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again like a fish trying to scream underwater. My father looked at the check again, like he was trying to solve a riddle with a sledgehammer. The silence wrapped around them like a noose. Behind me, the party buzz kept going. Someone laughed at a joke I didn't hear. A waiter refilled champagne flutes. Life didn't stop just because someone realized they'd finally lost control. And I didn't stop walking, because I knew the best part was still coming. 2 weeks before the retirement party, before the check, before the shocked silence and whispered gasps and that nauseatingly smug look Leslie wore until it fell apart like tissue in the rain, I made a phone call I shouldn't have had to make. I was in my kitchen, barefoot, standing in front of the open refrigerator like something cold might cure the fire simmering just under my ribs. My fingers hovered over the keypad for longer than I'd care to admit, because no part of me wanted to dial the number I'd memorized when I was 8 years old and still thought dad meant protector instead of opportunist. The phone rang 4 times before he picked up, and the way he said hello, all casual, like he was waiting on a golf buddy to confirm tea time, immediately pissed me off more than I thought it would. I tried to keep my voice level, tried to be the grown-up, the adult, the daughter who hadn't cut him off yet. I asked him, straight and simple, "So what time should I show up to the party?" The silence that followed wasn't the kind where someone's processing a surprise. No, this was calculated, measured. Like he was deciding whether to lie or twist the truth just enough to be technically correct. He said, "Well, Meg, it's just for family, you know how these things go." That sentence felt like a slap wearing gloves. Not aggressive. Not loud. Just surgical. "Just for family," he said, like I wasn't the one who kept his life upright every damn time it threatened to collapse. Like I was the outsider crashing some sacred blood ceremony. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I hung up without a word, and then I sat down on the kitchen floor and let the kind of anger settle in that doesn't boil, it ferments. Slow, quiet, toxic. And then I did what I always do when something doesn't make sense. I followed the money. I had a sinking feeling in my gut, the kind that shows up in your dreams with no face and just points at a door you're scared to open. I logged into the old joint savings account we'd opened when Mom died, back when he claimed he didn't trust online stuff and needed help managing things. I hadn't touched that account in years, assuming he had stopped using it long ago. He hadn't. Not by a long shot. There were withdrawals. Small at first, disguised as things that seemed plausible. Pharmacy bills, home repairs, little payments that didn't scream theft but whispered deceit. But then I found a transfer to Brad. Not listed as Brad, of course, but to an account I'd seen before, tied to that failed landscaping business he launched 3 summers ago. The amount? $6,000 for $100. Labeled startup loan. My name was on the memo line. My name. I stared at it for almost a full minute, blinking like maybe I was reading it wrong, like maybe I'd hallucinated my own betrayal. But it was there. Plain as day. My signature, scanned from old paperwork, attached to a loan I never authorized. That was when I stopped asking questions. I called Danielle. Danielle didn't gasp or scold or even seem surprised. She just said, "How quiet do you want this to be?" I told her I didn't want revenge. Not yet. I wanted precision. I wanted to untangle myself from every rope he'd wrapped around my name, my credit, my trust. We got to work. She pulled bank records, filed cease and desists, and drafted a formal withdrawal from all joint accounts and legally binding documents that ensured I would no longer be held responsible for any of his debts. While she worked, I hired someone else, a private investigator named Marcus, a quiet guy with a permanent 5 o'clock shadow and the energy of someone who knows 100 ways to disappear. He dug up more than I expected. Turns out, the house my father and Leslie lived in, the one I thought he'd paid off years ago, still mortgaged. But not in his name. Not entirely. He'd refinanced it twice and used my name as a co-signer years ago, when I was still sending checks without reading the fine print. Had told the bank I was an invested family partner. I wanted to vomit. Marcus also found something else. Leslie's son Brad had applied for a business grant and listed my hardware store's tax ID as a reference. The same store he revived, according to my father. The one I built from sawdust and splinters while they played house and reaped the benefits. The level of delusion and entitlement wasn't just disrespectful, it was criminal. And that's when I stopped being sad. That's when I decided this wasn't going to end quietly. Not for them. I didn't call him again. I didn't confront him or storm the house or ask why he thought this was okay. I just planned. I moved money, closed accounts, and packed the envelope with the check and the letter and the fine print that made sure he'd never so much as legally use my middle name again. And I RSVP'd to the party. Not through a phone call. Not with a card. I showed up in person with my name unlisted and my seat non-existent, because that's how they wanted me, unseen, unfelt, uninvited. But I didn't need a chair to make an impact. As the check fluttered from my father's stunned fingers to the floor like the last leaf in a dead season, I watched Leslie pick up her phone and step outside. Her heels clicked like a metronome for tension. I didn't have to wonder who she was calling. I already knew. And I was counting on it. The silence had been hanging over the room like fog over a graveyard, thick, clinging, almost sacred in its discomfort. People went back to their drinks like survivors, pretending the ship wasn't sinking beneath them. My father still hadn't said a word since Leslie read the note aloud, and for a man who built his personality around loud opinions and louder golf stories, that quiet was louder than any scream. His mouth opened a few times, like he was gearing up to speak, to scold, to reclaim control, but nothing came out except breath and maybe a flicker of panic he couldn't fully mask. Leslie was still outside, probably barking into the phone to Brad, trying to spin this like I was having some kind of breakdown, like I was the problem. Like this wasn't the natural consequence of nearly 2 decades of manipulation wrapped in birthday cards and backhanded compliments. But that wasn't my concern anymore. The part of me that used to flinch at her voice or brace myself for her passive-aggressive digs had been buried under the rubble of every invoice I ever paid without thanks. I walked over to the bar slowly, letting my heels echo against the polished tile like I was making a point just by existing. I picked up a glass of champagne, not because I wanted to celebrate, but because sometimes you need a prop, something to hold between you and the people who still think they can tell you who you are. I tapped the rim gently with my ring, and the soft chime drew more eyes than I expected. Heads turned. Conversations froze mid-sentence. And for the first time in a very long time, Every face was looking at me without the filter of assumptions or family politics. They just looked. "I'd like to say something," I said, my voice carrying steady through the space, even though my throat was tight with every unspoken thing I'd ever swallowed for the sake of peace. There were no protestations, no objections, not even from the table where my cousin had clearly been halfway through an eye roll. The moment belonged to me now, and they all knew it. "I know some of you might be wondering why I'm here," I began, taking a slow sip, giving them just enough rope to lean in, especially since, technically, I wasn't invited. A few uncomfortable chuckles. A few wide eyes. No one dared interrupt. "I got a call a few days ago. A friend of mine, well, more of a professional, asked me if I still considered my father family." It was an odd question, because for a long time, I believed that family was something unshakable. Like gravity or DNA. I paused, letting the weight of that land before continuing. But then I realized something. Family isn't blood. Family isn't obligation. Family is who shows up when things are ugly. When the bills pile up. When your knees buckle and you need someone to help carry the weight, not just pose in holiday photos with you. And for years, I showed up. Not just physically, but emotionally, financially, in ways that no one really saw because I didn't ask for credit. I thought love meant giving without conditions, without keeping score. Another pause. This one longer. The room felt held in place by the words, like air had thickened. I spent the better part of 21 years helping someone who never asked for it out loud, but always expected it in silence. And the thing is, when someone takes without thanking you, that's not love. That's just consumption. Eventually, you run out of things to give. My father finally spoke then, quietly, from behind clenched teeth. "I never asked you to help me." His voice was hollow, brittle, like an old man realizing the bank account he thought was limitless had run dry. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, "Exactly." No one clapped. No one cheered. They just watched, unsure if they'd witnessed a speech or a sermon or a slow-motion car crash. And that was fine by me. I wasn't there to be cheered. I was there to mark the end of something sacred that never really was. I placed the champagne glass back on the bar, still half full, and turned to leave. I didn't hug anyone. I didn't look back. The automatic doors whooshed open like the universe itself was done with the scene, and I stepped out into the cool night air, already lighter than I had been in years. I got in my car and pulled away, not fast, but with purpose, like a woman finally choosing her own direction instead of waiting for someone else to draw the map. The farther I got from the building, the quieter everything felt. I reached the highway and let the steady hum of tires on asphalt soothe the adrenaline still firing off in my bones. Then my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I ignored it at first. Let it buzz again. Finally, at the next red light, I picked it up. One message. From Brad. "You just ruined everything." I laughed. Not a dramatic cackle or a bitter chuckle. Just one short, genuine burst of laughter that felt like the cleanest breath I'd taken in years. But then came the second message. From Leslie. "This isn't over." The smile faltered, just a little. Not out of fear, not because she scared me anymore, but because I finally understood something about people like her. They don't end things. They just find new ways to sink their teeth in. I whispered, to no one and everyone, "Oh, honey, it never started." And then I drove.